Hey everybody, I have just recorded a podcast interview with Daniel from the Muslim Sceptic, which you can watch right now. It was an interview sort of both ways, so he was asking me questions, I was asking him questions. My questions were more about the modernism, liberalism, Islam as a theology. So I'm pretty sure you're gonna learn a lot of things, and I'm gonna share also my personal journey to Islam in this video. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. Some of the other topics, I'm just looking at the show notes Daniel posted. We're gonna talk about Dawah, how to approach Islam in Central and Eastern Europe. What's the future of Islam? Whether it's gonna change, it's gonna be liberalized, or it's gonna stay the way it is. How are we going to approach the battle of or the clash of ideas with modernism? Why do people need God and Islam in their life? Why it's not enough to just say, "Hey, I'm spiritual, so I'm good." We're gonna also touch on nationalism and anti-Muslim rhetoric in Eastern Europe. And definitely we're gonna focus on depression, mental health, and overall problems of people, millennials in this modern world, working a corporate job or working a job and going home watching Netflix, and the problems with this sort of lifestyle. If you need any halal food or something like that, there's a great shop. You can see the logo on the screen. It's called Shezamis, and they're from Prague. So go check that out. And yeah, let me know what you think. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of Muslim Skeptic Live. I am here with a special guest, Jan, who is joining us from Czech Republic in Europe. So to give you a background about Jan, he emailed me last year actually to set up a debate with an atheist, and that didn't work out for some reason. I think the other guy couldn't make it, or he dropped out. And then, but Jan reached out to me months later, and he said that he is transitioning to Islam. So this was something very intriguing. He said he wanted to talk to me about liberalism and modernism and just understand certain things as he is becoming Muslim. So thank you so much for joining us, Jan. How are you
Yeah,
today?
I'm doing good. And you can call me Jan because that's what most people call me, but it's actually pronounced Jan, but that's just a European thing, so you can ignore that. Um, but yeah, thank you so much, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, great. So tell me, Jan, at that time when we were first setting this conversation up, you said you were transitioning, but now you're telling me that you actually are beyond that stage. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, if I can summarize it, maybe I had I would call it love and hate relationship with Islam for the past 15 years. So I started out as a Catholic, born in a Christian Catholic country, Slovakia actually, not Czech Republic, but it's a country nearby. So most people won't even know that. And then at 15, I completely went to atheism for 10 years, I think. I was kind of like I wouldn't call myself a militant atheist, but I was, making fun of people who believe in God and this sort of thing, like very modern, typical kind of lifestyle. Very hedonistic lifestyle as well, by the way.
Yeah.
And then I went on a trip to Turkey, and I actually met with some of the Muslims there, and I really started to be intrigued about Islam. But that was like 10 years ago. And then 5 years ago, I actually wanted to make a YouTube video about passages from Quran which are kind of talking about killing somebody or something like that. So I was coming into Islam with a very specific agenda to take down some verses, and I didn't understand the context. Then in 2019, I got into a place where I realized that there probably is God, which is an evolution of a couple of years. But I still wasn't sure, okay, if there's a God, how can I be sure it's Islam? There's so many, there's so many religions, so many ways. And basically in 2020, I got my fitra awakened. So basically I had a really crazy experience. And I don't know if people can relate to this. If you're born a Muslim, probably not. But if you're a revert, there's a point where actually all of your programming from before kind of gets away, and you just kind of come to this conclusion that this is truth, not just based on logic, but based on a bunch of things coming together. That happened around April, but I was like really scared about this. So I think that was the time when I was in touch with you, around this time, and I started to read Quran, and but it was very like weak for me because I only had this experience, but I still couldn't understand a few things in Quran or in Islam which were troublesome for me, as like I had a very liberal kind of mindset. So I was trying to also organize this debate and also organize other debates, also for my own benefit. And then after some time, I kind of had my desires get a better hand of me, and I kind of said, okay, maybe this was just something random. Maybe this is not something I need to pay attention to, because I wasn't practicing anything. So I wasn't praying the way I should be praying 5 times a day. I was just trying to pray maybe once a day, and I couldn't pronounce Al-Fatiha. I couldn't do all these things. I had a lot of haram things going on in my life. So basically I had a lot of desires that I wasn't able to get rid of like in this such a short time. So I went back to some sort of phase of believing in God, but not really sure, and still inclining towards Islam, but very, very skeptic towards some of the things like hudud and all these things which are very controversial until you understand the context. And then basically around 4 months ago, I got fully in. I basically read the Quran. I have every passage that was controversial to me, I have researched, or everything that I wasn't sure about. Homosexuality, LGBT, there's so many things we can talk about. I researched and figured out the perspective without any bias, and I started actually practicing it, because it's to me it's more of a lifestyle as well, not just a religion. So praying, it's the biggest thing, right? And then actually going to mosque every day and being with a group of Muslims every day, surrounded by Muslims, which definitely helped me, because I was the only guy who's in Czech Republic. I mean, there's no Muslims here, so it's all immigrants, right? And I was the only guy there, but it really helped me to understand a lot of things, and actually to understand lifestyle. And then, yeah, just got rid of all my alcohol and all these things that was still keeping me up, and I'm now kind of on the straight path, very happy. And yeah, I wouldn't trade it. So I would say, like, I don't know what's the point where I'm right now, but that's where I am.
Okay, alhamdulillah. This is news to me. I just found out as well, because I thought you were still considering things, but now I'm very happy to hear that you took your shahada, and now you're, starting to pray and learn more about Islam. That's very great news. I'm very happy to hear that. So can you tell us a little bit more about what aspects of Islam, or what, because you said you were inclined towards Islam. Can you talk a little bit more about that and describe that? Like, what factors exactly?
I mean, it's a bunch of factors, but I think the biggest one is just understanding the basics and not getting, really into details of specific, sects within Islam and specific rules, but really just understanding who is Allah, just basic, who is Allah. If you get that, then even if you have like a Muslim who was born and left Islam, until he remembers who is Allah, I think this knowledge will still be able to pull him back towards to Islam back. But who is Allah, understanding basically the attributes, and praying, definitely a big thing. I would say for people who don't speak Arabic, it's a problem, but there's still a way to learn it, and not just within Salah, but also kind of speaking to God anytime you want, any time during the day, just kind of connecting to this, because this is the first time you're doing it, right? I didn't have this concept before, so it's like a great thing, especially for men, because men don't have, I would say, if you have psychological issues, or I had a very, very bad depressions, you don't really benefit from speaking to friends, speaking to therapists. It's good, but as a man, you feel sort of pride, or it doesn't work for you that as maybe for a woman. But if you have God, and if you talk to God with all your problems, or not all your problems, but you're trying to seek help, it's definitely something that can lift that, mental health issue, whatever that is. So that was one of the things that helped me. And then the overall concept of dunya, just understanding that the life here is, it's similar to Christianity, but not really, right? If you think about it, because the dunya is really something very specific for Islam. And right now I'm at a point where I'm not really excited about things. I wouldn't say I'm not excited, but I don't really get that excited about material things in here. Like I bought a car, it's nice, but I just always have to keep this mindset, like this is dunya, this is not what I should be excited about. This is not going to follow me to the grave. It's just very simple, just basics. And then the rest is, you kind of learn these things as you go. But getting this knowledge is even more important than what is modernism, what is liberalism, and all these things, because you have to understand who is Allah, and then you have to understand the concept of dunya and hereafter. Once you have this is like a solid base, at least for me.
So you were at a point trying to critique Islam, right? So you you mentioned to me that you had actually appeared on channels of ex-Muslims, those who had left Islam. So tell us about that. Like, what were you trying to do, and how did you come in contact with them?
Yeah, it was weird because I actually made a YouTube video about, I accepted Islam and then left it in 2 months or something like that. It was really I just did it, I think, for views. It's not something I would recommend, especially with this sort of topic, And then one of the really famous ex-Muslim guys, not the one you debated, but the other guy, reached out to me, and we had a talk, and I appeared on the live stream and talked through my experience until that point. But at that time, I wasn't practicing anything. I was just awakened. My fitra got awakened. So I had this realization, and I understood the concept of Islam, but I wasn't really 100% on board with it. And so we were talking about a few things. He was mentioning. I'm not mad at the guy. I didn't talk to him since then, but I don't think it was that big of a deal. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know what was the question. Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, okay, I didn't know that you had been Muslim and then you left after only 2 months.
No, I wasn't. I didn't do Shahada or anything. So,
okay.
I just said that in the YouTube kind of description, that leaving Islam, but I wasn't really there. I wasn't. I didn't do the Shahada, so it's not really something I could claim.
Okay. But yeah, that's interesting that this idea of leaving Islam, like you can have that as like a clickbait or something that can attract people.
It's very popular.
Yeah, so then you ended up researching different issues within Islam, and then you were able to address those concerns, and then you recently have become Muslim. So that's great. But do you want to talk about some of these issues that you had questions about, or that you're maybe concerned about earlier? Just we can talk about that aspect.
Yeah, sure. I think my questions will be more, because I also studied philosophy and a few of these things as you, but I definitely recognize you as like a really cool authority on this topic, and I watched a lot of your videos. So I think maybe we can talk about the difference between Islam.
This happened last stream too, but I've never had a problem like this before. So I think we're fine now.
Okay.
All right, go ahead and repeat. So my question was what were these issues? And then you gave me a question about something.
Yeah, so the question is basically, what is the difference between Islam and other religions from your perspective? Mainly, how would you describe it to non-Muslims? Because it's not clear for people who are not Muslim that, yes, there are differences in every religion, but what is the core difference between Islam and, let's say, the rest?
There's a huge difference between Islam and other religions, and it's not always apparent because people don't look into details, or they assume, especially even Muslims. Like, Muslims will not appreciate how different Islam is from other religions. So there are many aspects. Like, we can start on just theology, since you mentioned fitrah and you mentioned knowing Allah and the characteristics of Allah. So this is something that is huge, that Islam has a very consistent theology that has been the same in all the major details, in terms of there's one God, He is the creator, and there are angels and there are messengers that have been sent to humanity. God has created humanity, and then He guides them through messengers that He sends throughout human history, and they bring revelation, they bring books, and many more details of Islamic theology. That has been consistent, from the beginning of when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came as the final messenger. And that's a historical fact that anyone can research. And academics, non-Muslim academics, will confirm that, okay, these statements, the Quran itself can be dated, these manuscripts of the Quran can be dated within 15 to 20 years of the lifetime of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that is like a historical fact. And in the Quran, there are these theological claims, and those theological claims are consistent with what Muslims believe and practice today. So that level of consistency over time is not found in any religion. It's not found in Christianity, in Catholicism, for example. Catholics have had a huge schism and debate on the very nature of God. Right? And you had Unitarians, you had Trinitarians, you had within Trinitarians all these kinds of debates and complete, political conflicts on this issue of the nature of God and the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, and is it three? Is it one? So that's not even coming from necessarily the Bible. Those kinds of theological points are coming 300 years later, up to 500 years later, and then they kind of become canonized. So there's no such history like that when it comes to Islam. Judaism, same thing. Hinduism, it's not even clear when is the origin of Hinduism. Like, what is it some of the founding sacred scriptures of Hinduism? Are they from 3000 BC or from 1000 BC? Who is the actual author? Like, this is not even known to Hindus themselves. And also theologically, is Hinduism monotheistic or polytheistic, or is it henotheistic? Is it henotheistic?
You can choose, I guess.
Yeah, the Hindus will debate and argue, and they'll have different interpretations. Is it required to worship these gods, or what is the relationship between humanity and gods, or is there one God, Brahman, and different avatars of God in Shiva and so forth? So their theology is extremely diverse, right? There's not a consistent theology, and you can't trace it over time to an origin point in Hinduism. Same with Buddhism, same with all of these other religions. So Islam is very unique just in that aspect, and it's something that you can be a non-Muslim academic of religion and recognize that distinction. So that's one aspect. Look at things when it comes to practice of life, for example, in terms of how you live as an individual, your relationship with a spouse, like marriage, your relationship with your children, with your extended family. There are all kinds of detailed rules and guidance on all these different aspects of life. And it's like a very detailed plan for how humans should be able to live their lives. And then it extends beyond the family. There are rules about community. There's guidance about economics, like what kind of financial transactions are allowed, what's not allowed, what's going to be harmful. How can you make sure that there's justice maintained in the economic sphere? Like many of the kinds of financial practices that are used by Wall Street or these investment banks that are considered haram in Islam, and yet these are the investment practices like short selling and so forth that lead to all kinds of economic injustice and suffering and oppression. So Islam is prohibiting these kinds of things, and it's encouraging other kinds of transactions. That's in economics and criminal justice and in politics, which is siyasa in Arabic. So all of these things, there's a fleshed out moral, ethical system, and all of it is based on the Quran and the Sunnah, which again, it goes back to the origin of the messenger, peace be upon him, at the time. What other religion has that? What other religion can tell you like this financial transaction in detail? Like there are books that will give you, like this is a book that I'm studying now with a teacher. It's Al-Hidayah. It's Hanafi fiqh, but this is just on marriage. Just on marriage. And not all the rules will be applicable or all the guidance will be applicable to a person, but it shows like the depth of thought by these scholars and their Muslim scholars, and their utmost concern is tying everything to revelation. Okay, they're not trying. In fact, they're very worried about just giving their own opinion or just speaking like this is what we believe, or because they were aware, even though this is from hundreds of years ago, they are aware that cultural bias can affect what you are projecting onto Islam, as opposed to teaching what is the true message of Islam and the true guidance of Islam. So the scholars of Islam are also very concerned about this, and they provide like this level of guidance and understanding of the way that human beings are meant to conduct their lives according to the Creator, because the Creator is going to be the one who best knows what's good for human beings. So if there were like a book like this in Christianity, then we could hold them and we can compare and we can do a kind of analysis. Or there is a Hindu version of Al-Hidayah. We could bring it and we can do that comparison. Or Buddhism. But they don't even have anything comparable to that. They don't even have something that is like that. Like in Christianity, you ask like, okay, what does it mean to have a successful marriage? Or what happens if you get divorced and then you want to reconcile with your wife? How does that work? What do you owe? What are your responsibilities in depth? Like some of the issues that are discussed in Al-Hidayah, for example, is imagine that you marry someone and you give like a mahar. A mahar is like a gift to the bride from the groom's side of $1,000 dollars. And then the bride returns that as a gift to you, the $1,000 to the husband. But then you want to divorce for some reason. What happens to that $1,000? How much of it do you have to return? Do you have to return half of it? Do you have to return none of it? What if it's not a currency? What if that gift was in terms of an animal? Okay, and this is very, very detailed. And it's tied to certain verses of the Quran where God actually describes what you should do in those kinds of situations in the Quran. So this is not found in other religions. The only religion, like Christianity, the priest or the pastor or the parishioner, he'll just say, be good to your wife, don't treat her badly. Maybe divorce is not allowed. Or maybe divorce is allowed, or maybe but is it based on a very solid legal tradition that can be, that is based and derived from revelation? No, they can't claim that because the Bible doesn't actually contain many of these kinds of detailed rulings or rules. The only religion that people can say is Judaism. Because Talmudic law, Mosaic law, is actually very extensive. It's very extensive. So they'll say, okay, here's an alternative. But the difference between Talmudic law and Islamic law is that Talmudic law is based heavily on rabbinical opinion. And this is actually a part of their theology, because in Judaism, the rabbi has the authority to argue with God and try to win a debate with God using his intellect and his knowledge of scripture, like the Talmud and the Torah. The rabbi can argue and debate with God, and if he wins the debate, then that becomes the law, what the rabbi has said. And this is a part of their theology. This is a part of their theology, that the law is not in heaven. The law is actually something that the rabbi has, and it's based on what the rabbi. And the Quran actually mentions this and refers to this, that Jews and Christians have made their religious figures, like their rabbis, and they have made them into gods, right? Because the right and wrong, halal and haram, should be determined by what God says, not what a man thinks is right or wrong or decides is right or wrong. It should be determined by God. So that's the difference with Judaism, but Judaism is the only other religion that can claim to have a body of law other than Islam. But then they have all these theological issues and incoherences. So I mean, this is, in a nutshell, the kinds of arguments that you can make, and it's arguments that I'm making as a Muslim, but non-Muslims can understand and have points of rebuttal and the conversation. But I think Muslims can very handily win those kinds of debates.
Yeah, I mean, if you just think about it, nowadays religion is considered very individualistic thing. Like, it's your preference. It's something you do behind closed doors. But it would make sense, just logically speaking, that if there is a religion, it would actually be also a philosophy. It would be a way of life. It would be a political system. It would cover economy. It would cover justice. It would cover every bit of society, right? Otherwise, it's just something you do for your own kind of thing, but it doesn't affect the society. And I think this is like the biggest difference, and it's so hard to understand for people who live in today's world where everything is individualistic, that Islam is the opposite for liberal democracies, not in a religious sort of way, but also because it's politics, it's a justice system, it's economy, it's completism. If I go on the street here in Prague, nobody claims to be religious or Christian or any other religion. They just say, "Oh, I don't follow any religion." So, how would you maybe define this modernism? Have you seen sort of a new wave of this secular modernism in the past 10 years, maybe, or when do you think it began? This whole idea of we don't need a religion in our life and we're good to do whatever we want.
It started in the 17th century. So it started after the Protestant Reformation, and you had a lot of Christians become disillusioned and disenchanted with Christianity, with the Bible, and all of the conflict that had happened, and wars, violence on the basis of religious difference. So that was the birth of modernism, because people were saying that we don't need God to understand what is right or wrong. We don't need the Bible to understand what is right and wrong. We can just use our own minds. So that was the beginning of secularism as an idea. And prior to that, you couldn't really separate. How can you live your life without scripture? How can you know what is right and wrong unless God tells you what is right and wrong? God is the source of goodness. But then you have this kind of secular understanding of the world itself. Like, the world is just objects that are moving through empty space according to the laws of physics. And there's no need for God to explain how that can work. There's no need for God to support the motion of things. We have these laws that are guaranteeing certain kinds of reactions and movements in empty space. And this is deism, basically. Deism, if you've heard, which was the main kind of outlook of the Enlightenment thinkers. those who weren't atheists, they were deists. So they said God is really irrelevant, and we don't need him to understand the world. We don't need him to understand morality. But in recent times, like that's always been the secular background that's been shipped to every part of the globe through imperialism and colonialism. But now it's like it's accelerating, it seems, like in terms of the level of individualism, because things like gender is being questioned, things like, you know, your orientation is being questioned. All of these kinds of identities are suddenly now in question. And that's a product of a kind of secular modernist mindset. The reason being is that when you are a modernist and you're secular, you want to get away from all traditions, right? Because you want to use your mind and be rational, purely rational. But traditions hold you back and they restrict you. Traditions are something that will limit your choice and your agency. The religious tradition being the main thing. Like, who cares what someone said hundreds of years ago in a book or in a piece of revelation? That's going to restrict your choices and constrain your life. We don't want that. We want to be free and to choose all of these things in our lives. And so we have to reject religious tradition for sure, but then all other traditions, like in the US context, all of these protests that are happening, they're protesting like the founding fathers of the United States as being racists and white supremacists, which they were, but that tradition, like the American tradition, there's a huge reaction against it. Like, we have to throw that away. And I'm not saying that I'm not defending American tradition, but it's this idea that traditions are bad. The past is something that we constantly have to escape so that we can be on the right side of history. But the problem with that is...
You're describing exactly my thinking like a couple of years ago. Like, this is exactly how I was thinking.
Yeah, so the problem with that, though, is that everything, like, how can you have language without tradition? How can you have any basis? How can you have an identity without tradition, right? Because your language, the words that you use, you didn't invent the language, like you learned it, and there are certain conventions that are coming from the past, right? In terms of how you speak. So that's a language tradition that you are, that you have to use. And this is exactly where postmodernists come in, right? Because postmodernists and some of the continental European thinkers like Jacques Derrida and others will say that no, even language tradition, language has no meaning. We have to be able to invent our own meaning for words, right? So that's postmodernism, post-structuralism. But also identity, because if you're part of an identity group, like imagine you are part of LGBT identity, like you're saying, I am homosexual and this is my community. Well, that community pre-exists you and your birth. So that is something that would constrain you if you're part of a community. You as an individual are not free to just say whatever you want if you're part of a community. So then that in the future, like, and this is already happening, you have people attacking the standard or the old school LGBT movement, or the old gays. The old gays are backwards in their mentality. We have to renew, like they have these kinds of bigoted ideas. The old gays, they're not as open to transgenders, for example. And so this is a big conflict within the LGBT group, that the trans are arguing against the gays and vice versa. So, but this is never ending. It cannot end. Every single identity will have to come into question. And gender is the same thing. If you say that you're a man or a woman, we want to have the choice not to be human. We want to be another species, another animal. So this is how liberalism and modernism really destroys every possible identity, every possible aspect of culture, because it's anti-traditional.
But it starts off, if you think about it, it starts off pretty pretty nice in a way where, hey, don't you want to be free? Don't you want to do whatever you want to do? Like, it's very appealing, especially to Muslims who are brought up, traditional Muslims. I'm not talking about reverts, but the people who are born Muslims and they get to the age, let's say 16 or 18, and they feel that they are being constrained by their religion, and that they need to go out there and experience freedom. Otherwise, I don't know, they'll be kind of left off from the world. And I've met so many people like this that just said like, oh, I'm a Muslim just by name, but my grandma practiced. I don't really need that in my life now. And they come to the, let's say, modernism from the other side, where they are trying to get the freedom, but they don't know that it's going to end in this sort of environment which you just described. And I'm coming from the other perspective because I lived in that sort of cesspool my entire life. And I'm coming back to like structure and basically stripping away all the identities and everything. And it's a very weird thing. So what would you say maybe as an advice to people who are Muslims, who are born Muslims, but they feel that, maybe I should try to get drunk, or I should go on Tinder and hook up with somebody. Like, maybe I should do these things. Maybe I'm missing something. What would be your advice to them? And, or maybe like, how would you change this? I don't know if there's a way to change this, but.
Well, you'd be in a better position to understand like this, what should be said to them. But, because you've experienced those things.
Yeah, but the people who haven't, right? So they have been living as Muslims for their whole life, but they feel they want to do something outside of that. Is there a way you could communicate with them? I mean, this is good also for your family, because one day you probably want to talk to your kids about this, right? When they get to that age. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that seem like they're going to be great and wonderful from a distance, and you don't really know the nature of it until you look at the dark side, which is not being advertised. So people who drink, okay, it is a very serious addiction that can develop from drinking. And now, especially with the situation with COVID, drinking levels have gone way up. And it is leading to a lot more depression, a lot more mental illness. It is leading to suicide, because alcohol is actually a depressant. It lowers your mood. And there's actually a period in South Africa where, because of COVID, they halted sales of alcohol. And then it was South Africa or Australia. This was in last year. They halted sales, and the amount of trauma and deaths from alcohol-related accidents took a huge nosedive. Like, people were safer; they weren't getting into accidents and death because of alcohol, because of this halt in sales. But then they resumed sales of alcohol, and it shot back up, like the amount of death and trauma. So if you want to know like what is the downside or the harm of drinking, ask the drunk driver who ran over or killed inadvertently because of drunk driving a child or a family, and see if he thinks it's worth it. See if you want to ask like what is good about drinking, ask the mother whose child was born with fetal alcohol syndrome.
You were talking about the drunk people, and I used to drink quite a lot from the age of 14, almost 3 times a week, I would say, until blackout. So I have some pretty good experience. Wow. And I know the results, talking about zina, talking about, getting into relationships, which you shouldn't be in these relationships. It's just because you connected with this person because of alcohol, but you have nothing in common or something. Yeah. Or, getting into fights, drunk driving, all these things happen to me. And since alcohol is a normal drug, it's everywhere in the world, and it's not everywhere, obviously, but in the Western world, let's say. So it's accepted as something normal. People drink. You go let's say you go on a holiday with your family, everybody's drunk. This is pretty normal, actually. And you look weird if you're not drinking. Like, I remember this Christmas, actually, we were having a dinner, and I didn't drink, and people were like, why are you not drinking, Jan? It's Christmas. And I was like, well, I don't really celebrate Christmas, but I can't drink. And so I didn't really explain that, but I think where it comes from, those people who want to do that, not as Muslims, I'm talking about born Muslims, is they're trying to escape because they have some sort of they have some issue going on. It's simple. They don't understand who Allah is. Like, if you understand this, you will never do this. And I haven't drinked or smoked marijuana or anything since I understood this. So I think it's just going back to who Allah is. Like, you have to drill this in your head, because and people, maybe, I don't know if born Muslims are maybe looking at this differently because they hear it every day. They've been brought up in this, so they might have a big, but for me it was mind-blowing to understand dunya, to understand who Allah is. Like, never heard these things. So it's just going back to that, but it's very difficult. And once you have that, you have the meaning in life, then you don't need to escape through any drug. You don't need to do anything. You just need to stay on the straight path, right? I think that's the answer. It's just going back. It's very difficult. And they have the belief, they have the keys, but they just think that the answer is out there. And what is the answer? Like, what will happen when you die? Like, just think about it. Like, who has the keys? Is the world gonna give you the meaning, or what? Like, it's not gonna happen. What, your work is gonna be more important than what happens, or what will happen there? The girls, like, this is all short-term gratification. It's all like shaitan, right? It's all very clear once you have this perspective, but it's just, you have to develop this perspective, and it takes some time. But I don't know. I think that's the answer.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think that's a beautiful answer. Thank you so much for that, and reminding us of the importance of thinking about Allah. I really think that's the answer, because if you know Allah, then why would you disobey your creator? Why would you think that you can have a good result by going against his guidance? That is the perfect answer. Absolutely agree. A lot of Muslims, though, they, not a lot, but some have a kind of a problem with their fitrah. Like you mentioned, like your fitrah was awakened, and sometimes if your fitrah is covered or you get confused because of the environment, then it's also good to like reflect on some of the tangible results of these practices, because you don't, like some Muslims might fall into doubts, or they might feel weak in their iman, and they might not have the same kind of understanding that Allah is the one who is deciding, and I have to attach myself to what Allah is commanding and be pleased with that. They might fall from that understanding for a moment, and then it helps to like realize that, well, these things are bad. Like, just when you see the results of them, if you don't have the confidence or the yaqeen, the certainty in your heart, you can also
voted in the country. Okay, it's now registered, then it's this, then it just progresses. Okay, I'm just gonna say yes. Like, what's wrong with that? So like, most people think like this. You can't really go deep into your values because you really like are talking about the basic beliefs that you have as a human being, which you have to think about. You have to ponder over these things, and it's very difficult. Why do you think people don't like to talk about, let's say, what's wrong with freedom? What is wrong with democracy? What's wrong with liberalism? Why do they assume that, let's say, freedom is good? Like, why do people assume that? Or why do you think that they have these things? And do you believe that tackling these issues against Islam is really going back to like first principles in all these ideas, and just kind of deconstructing the basic values, the first principles, whether that's liberalism or democracy, freedom, all these things?
Well, people aren't.
Because yeah, go ahead.
They're not necessarily reflective, right? People aren't thinking about these aspects of their lives. They just go with the flow. They go with the crowd. That's very common. Like, it's very rare for someone to necessarily think about what's their purpose? Why am I here on earth? What am I meant to do? Is this it? Am I supposed to just wake up, go to work, do my job, come home for 20, 30, 40 years and then die. Like that's my only purpose in life. So it's rare like for people to reflect, and there are so many influences in your life in the modern world that are trying to get you to be blind and not think about these kinds of questions. Just think of everything as great and normal. Keep going to the grocery store, keep ordering from Amazon, keep consuming. That's all you need to be worried about. Because if you start thinking about, okay, maybe this is not good, maybe this is not what I'm here for, maybe there's more to life than consuming, then you're not going to be a very good consumer. You're not going to be a very good citizen, and under the power of these governments. So they're encouraging you not to think about these issues. So this is a big problem.
But when you start thinking about them, let's say, you sound crazy. Like it sounds like, okay, I'm thinking about the purpose of life. I'm talking to people. My mom says, okay, just don't talk to me about this. Or everybody's just like, what are you talking about? And then I'm like, okay, what do I do now? Well, but you can't stop thinking about this. It's something you have to come to grips to understand, because it will drive you crazy and it will create a tremendous amount of depression. I actually believe a lot of people in our age, I don't know how old are you?
I'm 35.
Okay, so I'm 30. So a lot of people around our age, and then millennials, let's say, from the Western world, they have really high levels of depression and mental health. And it's the sickness of the society that tells you the purpose of life is anything external. And I used to be in this mindset for a decade, maybe. I wanted to, I have two companies, so I wanted to become somebody in business. And I thought this is going to prove my value or whatever. I don't even know to who, like what. And then I wanted to be the best, swimmer or doing anything in sports, then something in this area. And it's always like just externally trying to find the purpose, like trying to go after something that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
And it's actually the opposite. It's the purpose is, like for the past few months that I talked about, since I started practicing, it's very clear. I don't have any depression, nothing. I sleep like a baby. Every day I go to sleep like a baby. And it's just very clear, all the questions every time I go into Salah, or, it's just I read Quran or anything like that, or I go to a masjid or the mosque and I talk to guys there, and we go and eat something together. It's just so clear, like this is it. And you don't have these questions, you don't have these depressions. But until you have this, you take, there's so many pills, especially in the US. I used to work in the pharma industry, and there's so many companies, and the insurance companies are working against the actual people in the US. In Europe, it's a bit different, but still there's a lot of prescription drugs, a lot of things like that. I think this is, like you said, I think in one of your videos, like the modern lifestyle is very weird. Like you go to work, then you watch Netflix, you eat takeout, and then you die, right? It's basically, that's it. You don't have any connection to your parents, because I had to move from a village to Prague, which is a big city. So I'm here alone, right? My family is back there. I call them once in 2 weeks, and for their entire life, for 50 years, they used to grow up in one house, all of them. And I'm the only one that moved out. So it's like, this is the modern lifestyle. This is how people live. You have to go to the big city, find a corporate job or any sort of job. I mean, I don't have to, but it's still better if you go to a bigger city. And it's just, this is what's going to happen. Yeah, so I'm just venting here, but I just feel like this is important to say for people who are in this age and who live like this,
Yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to realize that life is very depressing if you live according to the modern script, the modernist script, and this promise of, we have so many liberties, we have so much freedom and choice, and there's all democracy, and you can buy whatever you need and want and go on vacation and have these experiences. This is a hollow promise. There's nothing really that is satisfying, and that's because we weren't created to live like this. This is not how Allah created us, and this is not our nature. So we're not going to be happy and satisfied until we live according to the way that the Creator designed us and created us to live.
Yeah.
So I
I don't
think
think it's
people,
possible, right? It even says in Quran, like people who choose their desires over Allah, like they're never gonna like feel anything. Like it's always like the circle. You're running around chasing something that doesn't actually fulfill you. And just thinking about the concept of Jannah and just thinking about like this got me, I think, like a few months ago when I listened to this Czech talking about it. It's just so it's just so worth it, you know. It's just why are you trying to do something here when and then not convincing yourself but really understanding like this is the truth. There is no mistake in this religion. There is no even a doubt in this. You just have to come to grips to that with that. Once you understand this, you know what's going on, and this dunya becomes like you know, you're a traveler, you're going in some other city, this is airport, and you're just waiting here, you're not here to stay. And it's just a simple concept, but it changes everything, and you don't get swayed by a car or by this or that. It's just okay, whatever happens happens. And it's just it's a beautiful way of life. I think it's the best thing to do, but you know, very difficult.
yeah, it's difficult when there's all these pressures that are telling you to live a certain way. And yeah, that's interesting about your family. So do you have any plans to like reconnect with your family by moving, or how did they actually react to or do they know that you're Muslim?
Oh, yeah. Well, some of them do. I mean, my grandmas, both of them are very old. And so they think about death all the time. And I think like just talking about death is very depressing with my family, but they sort of appreciate it. They always remind me like, hey, we're gonna die soon. One of them is really Catholic, but you know, she really is open to Islam. So I talk to her about you know, how Jesus is in Islam, and you know, just the basics of theology. And I want to bring her the Quran in the Slovak language, so she can read it because she doesn't speak English. So that's, you know, that's very. I never expected that my grandmothers, who were very strict when I was growing up, Catholic, you know, they come to this point where they are like doing yoga and doing all these things, like very weird.
Why
uh,
why are
and
they
my
doing yoga?
I
Just for
think it started
exercise?
in the, yes, exercise and yeah, just trying all these spiritual things, you know, this new age stuff. For them, it's old age, new age, you know, it's just like a combination of things. Because I think they see like this doesn't work for us, this Catholicism, right? It doesn't bringing me. Like they even said, like I want to upgrade. Like, what's the next level, you know? So so
Nice.
yeah, but
Inshallah.
it's yeah, inshallah. But they lived like 70 years in that you know state, so it's very difficult to change in, but it's possible. And yeah, I think it's overall it's no problems. I didn't have any issues. I know a lot of reverts have them, but I didn't. I mean, there's people in my family who hate Islam like openly, but those are like my aunts or somebody, I don't know. So it's not really something somebody who I'm very close to, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So you do have a community there. So you mentioned going out and eating, but you're saying they're mostly immigrants. But do you see any others like who are either Slovakian or Czech that are showing interest? You don't know any in your personal circles?
Zero, zero. So I feel weird, right? But no, there's one guy I've met. One guy was there, but usually all of them are from Algeria or Egypt or the States. I met some guys there, and you know, just people expat who live here because a lot of expats live in Prague. There are, I think, 4 or 5 mosques here, and I visited almost all of them. And it's just Turkish people or but yeah, actually, last week I watched a live shahada of a Czech person who was on a wheelchair, and that was really like emotional to watch, you know. So that was really interesting.
Mm.
I think this is a great actually concept. Like when you travel around the world, all you need to do is Google Maps, the closest mosque. You go there, and you feel like you know, you feel great. You feel like you're home anywhere in the world. This can happen in any sort of major city. You find mosques, even the most atheistic. So, um, you know, it's great. But I'm usually the only white face there, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. That's very interesting. I don't know what it's like to live in a European city. I've only been to Berlin on continental Europe.
That's
Uh,
similar, yeah.
yeah, but it's But are there a lot of pressures from the government there, or in terms of putting restrictions on Muslims or on hijab or anything like that?
Not really. It's because it's not a big community. Like in France and Germany, you have millions of Muslims who came there in the 60s, I think, uh, because of the working visas. Right here, I think it started in the 90s, and there's like thousands of them. So if you see somebody wearing hijab or a Muslim, it's usually a tourist, or it's somebody who just lives here for work. And there's a couple of local ones, but it's not that big of a deal. But there's a strong rhetoric. People hate Islam here. When I say hate, they will burn Quran in the square. Like the politicians talk about like Muslim countries are invading us because of this immigration that happened a few years back, when from Syria people were refugees coming through Hungary to UK, and they have to go through Prague or Czech Republic or Slovakia, right? And yeah, so there's a strong rhetoric. But actually, it's a Vietnamese immigrant who has the strongest stance against Muslim, which is very strange because he's not a local here. So, but anyways, very bad rhetoric, but it's not a lot of Muslims, so I don't think this is going to be a problem here.
Do you think this is like a rising movement, like this kind of nationalist, anti-immigrant attitude is rising?
It's yeah, it's definitely rising, especially in like Western Europe, and then in Slovakia, where a lot of people are harassed, like especially if you wear hijab. I don't think even Islam is recognized as an official religion, but as a sect in Slovakia. So a lot of problems with practicing, I think there's one halal shop here where you can get a good meat. And then, it's just very difficult to live in this. I think it's not the same in the States, but I think it's similar, where you live in a society which is used to live in a completely different way. So you have these small islands of Islam, but it would be much easier to live in Turkey or in Saudi or somewhere like that. But I don't have anyone there. I wouldn't. Maybe I want to go there for a few months, but I want to probably live here.
Yeah,
So
your main job, like you're an entrepreneur, like you have your own
yeah.
businesses. So you could
Yeah,
live
I can
anywhere.
work from anywhere. Yeah. I can live anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, so
But right now with the COVID, I wanted to go to Istanbul a few days from now, but it's just very difficult. You can't even fly out. So
yeah. Yeah, that's very concerning that they have this kind of anti-Islam attitude, but you think that they just don't really know much about Islam. They just is there feeling like threatened by immigrants? Like, I don't understand that mentality. I was talking to another person just a few weeks ago who is also from an immigrant background, but he's taking an anti-immigrant stance. I just don't understand, like, when your parents are immigrants, how can you be so aggressively anti-immigrant?
I understand it because I used to have that mentality. Because Islam is viewed as something really far away, and it's actually, if you think about a few common things with Christianity, it is sort of an upgrade. So you could understand who was Jesus, and it's not like completely different. It's not like Hinduism, but from our perspective in Europe, like somebody from India is more closer than somebody from like I don't know, Saudi, right? Just like on value system level or something like that, because Islam is very just looked upon as weird. And it's all these media campaigns and just terrorist campaigns. It's just weird. Like when I used to look at the Quran or look at the Arabic language, the first kind of like association is like terrorism. That's my first association. It's programmed from the day you are brought into school. It's just something you do. So a lot of, especially in Eastern Europe, Central Europe, people just like Islam terrorism. It's simple as that. It's very heartbreaking. I can't change that because it's been promoted for decades like that. But what can you do? And these are countries who are not colonizing. These are like Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia. These are countries who are white, but they were communist. So these are locked up countries who are opened for 40 years now. But because they haven't experienced this migration, it's still something new, and it's still something like, we don't trust a lot of people. Let's put it this way. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have any kind of thoughts on how that can change? Like just for getting people educated on Islam, like is there any kind of
Mm.
strategy that can be pursued, or because I'm sure a lot of
Well,
Muslims would
yeah.
like to, do dawah to that part of the world, and Eastern Europe is maybe not a focus of a lot of dawah. It's a lot of focus on Western Europe, maybe.
Hmm.
But when
Yeah.
people don't know about Islam, then it's very easy to hate it and think that it's just about terrorism. It's not surprising that they would be burning Qurans and like their squares. Um,
Yeah. I think this has to be somebody like me. There's no way there's going to be like an Egyptian guy doing dawah here. This doesn't exist.
mhm.
Even the guys in the mosque said like zero dawah here. So it has to be somebody like me who gets a full, or not me, but like somebody who's a Czech or Slovak or somebody from the nation who embraces Islam and actually is educated on all the things, and practices it. And then who does the dawah. That's the only way. And then maybe holds an office, or like if I became a prime minister and then I would say like, hey, surprise, I'm a Muslim, did you know that? Then that would be maybe that would change the mindset of a lot of people, but I don't think I'm gonna do that. So I just think it has to come from somebody local, which, I mean, all you need is like in Quran they say like you need one rijal, one man who does say how things are, and it can actually change society. But I think you need like a movement, and it's very difficult to build any movement around this here. So yeah, but you never know.
Yeah, Allah knows. So if you make an effort with a good intention, then Allah can give you tawfiq, basically give you success that you couldn't even anticipate just because of you having a good intention, a good niyyah. So that's something that I think a lot of Muslims need to start thinking about. Like Eastern Europe, also there are people who need to hear about Islam, but some of the things I hear about Eastern Europe, like Poland recently, like with their laws against abortion and they have
Mm.
laws against LGBT, like that makes me think they are definitely not wanting to go on this path of modernism. Like they see that there's a big problem with modernism and liberalism. So what I find a lot of nationalists doing is they revert to a kind of white nationalism. Like we have our European heritage, we have our
Yeah.
Christian European heritage is kind of a mix of religion and race. But I haven't. It's not very coherent. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot
No.
of problems with that kind of narrative. But I think that it's a very opportune time for Islam to also be seen as alternative,
Yeah.
as you described your own experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways to think about it. A lot of people who revert and they are like excited, like me, they go into speakers' corners in London and just talk about Islam. And that's good, but you are not a scholar. You will come across an issue which you will not be able to understand or, mm, I don't know, talk about. And I don't think that's the best way of dawah actually to do debates, because I wasn't convinced through debate. I mean, it was a logical kalam cosmological argument that was like first like, this makes sense. There must be a God, but it's more got to do with your emotions, your fitra, and just kind of the emotional connection to Allah is what actually makes somebody to consider Islam. Because I fight on YouTube with a lot of Christians or people who give me a lot of arguments against Islam or something, and it's like 20 comments in about a certain topic, and I'm like, well, technically you can study Islam until you die and you still wouldn't know everything. So when are you going to make a decision? How, like, the knowledge is infinite, so you have to understand the basics, and the rest you just have to do. I mean, it's, you can't just study forever. I mean, it's impossible, right? So
Yeah.
I think dawah is just doing this, like, what's the purpose of, like, what do you think happens when you die, and just doing these sort of debates, not really talking to people and debating them like atheists versus this, but really just connecting with people one-on-one, and then they come back to you, and you can answer their questions. And in terms of the Poland and all these anti-abortions, I think a lot of young people and from my age, they hate it, they
Mhm.
don't like it. It's just like, oh, these old people, they have to die so that we can open this up. So it's not something, uh, it's a lot of extremism, a lot of white nationalism for sure, but a lot of it's similar to like Republicans in the U.S. It's very different. Is it difficult to understand the difference between somebody who supports Trump than somebody who's like a typical Republican and somebody who's a white nationalist? Like they all share something similar, right? But it's a bit different. So I think you can compare it to that. Like on the surface, it is like a political movement, but there are some extremist things, and I saw it in my from experience. I saw when actually 5,000 Nazis took over the capital city of Slovakia, Bratislava, and they harassed people and beat people and tourists and from the castle. And it was actually Arab family was there on the main train station with a hijab, and they were throwing rocks at them. So it's very surface, like underneath the surface, it's very kind of disturbing. So I wouldn't say it's very based on God or Christianity, you know, it's just a cover up.
Yeah, that's my impression too. Like when I see some of these white nationalists, that they just are grabbing for anything that will give them a sense of belonging to a group. And
which doesn't make sense, right? Like, why would you want to associate with a group based on race or based on something when you can do it based on belief, which you chose? So this is the best way to associate with someone. If I go to a mosque, I know like these people, I know their values because they're Muslim, right? So I know like these people don't drink, these people have these sort of values. Even they're from Algeria or they don't speak my language, I can probably have a friendship with them, which would have more value for me than somebody who's 100% look like me, speaks the same language, has the same education. But all the time when we were at work, they talk about trading a stock exchange, and I'm getting bored to death just by thinking about it, because it's, you know, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't. I mean, it does on some level, but, you know, no.
Yeah, that's not what life is all about. How much can you talk about getting rich and getting money? So
yeah, some people do that for their entire life. I mean, that's all they do. So
yeah, so that's very interesting. So I'd be interested to see what you experience when you go to hopefully Istanbul and other Muslim countries and travel, and you have a little bit flexibility. Hopefully this year there's going to be less restrictions on travel. Let's see. But actually, I'll get your thoughts on that. Like, what do you think about what's happening globally with these kinds of restrictions and how the world is changing?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have any specific idea about that. I just think, you know, I was looking up the official news, like what do they say? Then I'm looking at this, like it's been a year. Something should happen. I still don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. The vaccine should be the light, but you can see the side effects, and a lot of people here got vaccinated and they're sick. So I don't know. I don't really even think about it, because for me the year has been really transformative, and I still meet with people in the mosque. I still go to shops. So I didn't never go to movies, or since I don't drink or anything, it doesn't affect me that much, to be honest. Like my life got 100% better with Corona because I have more time to study, and if I go out, I go out. You can still go out here. So I just bought a car and go on road trips here and there. But I think, you know, it's something outside of our control. I think it's definitely something with national interest, with a group of people who are using this for something. I'm not saying they created it, but they definitely are trying to use this as for a gain, whether it's China or Bill Gates or somebody. I don't know, and I'm not really gonna go there because it would take me my time to discuss this, you know. So but yeah, I think people get caught up in this a lot, and they read the news, and it's just, you know, I think, you know, wear a mask, wash your hands, and then what can you do, you know? I wouldn't really be bothered.
Yeah, I'm not gonna bore you with my views on everything, but I think a lot of people like you are wondering, like, there seems to be something more going on. There seems to be people who are really taking advantage of the situation. So what is the meaning of that? Like, what does that imply? So I think a lot of people are coming to that same kind of conclusion as you, even though, you know, they might not go as far on their conclusions as others. One other thing,
Yeah.
so do you have any other like questions about Islam that you want to talk about, or issues that you think are interesting, or you have questions?
Yeah, sure. I think one would be, do you believe that Islam can be actually changed and be more liberalized with the, when you see like the LGBT movement and everybody, and I saw a lot of videos, for example, one, I think there was a gay person who said like, well, I'm a Muslim, but I'm also gay. So when is Islam going to accept me? So what do you what do you think will happen in the future, let's say 10 to 20 years from now, to Islam? And do you believe like Quran can be changed? Like what do you, because Bible, I think it was changed, but technically the Pope actually changed his stance on the homosexuality recently. I don't think this will happen, but what is it possible that Islam will stay the way it is, or you will just look at the Quran and the Sunnah, and it wouldn't be affected by the West or the overall, things that are going on?
The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a hadith that there's always going to be a group of Muslims, believers, who are going to hold fast, and they're going to preserve basically commitment to Islam. Western Europe as well. They are trying to push reform, but when you reform Islam, you're changing. It's no longer Islam, right?
Yeah.
You can't really. How can you change Islam's stance on homosexuality when you have 80 verses of the Quran that essentially is condemning it? So I don't think that Islam can be liberalized. That would be liberal Islam is not Islam. It's another religion. But
So do you think, because you used a nice wordplay, Islam be liberalized? Do you think liberalism can be Islamized? Is that an option?
I think that a lot of Islamic values can be adopted by liberal people, and they can practice. Like I think that these white nationalists, for example, or these more conservative people, they're still liberals, right? Because most of them, if you ask, what do you think about democracy? What do you think about human rights as this kind of abstract concept? They'll say, yeah, we are all for these kinds of liberal ideas. So they're still liberal in that broader philosophical sense, and they're probably not at the level where they're critiquing the deeper aspects of liberalism. But those individuals, despite being liberal, they're still recognizing that, okay, maybe giving women the right, the unilateral right to just abort their child, maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe rampant zina, sex, premarital sex, maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe, alcoholism and drinking and drugs, maybe that's not the best idea. So these kinds of values, especially even if it's from Islam, like those can be promoted, and that will bring people, if they adopt those values, could bring them closer to Islam.
Mhm. Got it.
Allahu A'lam. Is that what you're thinking, like when you asked the question?
Yeah. I think that's true. And what would you say maybe is like the future of liberalism? Maybe like, do you think it ends with us being uploaded into cloud, like you concluded in the video, in your video, or because it's illogical? I mean, I'm from a tech startup background, so I talk to a lot of tech founders, and these people, they're all liberal, and so you think that is actually going to happen? Some sort of crazy Black Mirror episode, or I don't know. What's your opinion on the future? Where does this end liberalism? Because eventually you can extrapolate the freedom to all parts of your life, and the hedonistic principle from John Locke, like to everything. But is that like going to happen, or is there like a point where even the liberals say like, no, I mean, this is too much?
I don't think the liberals will ever say this is too much, because if they were going to have that conclusion, they should have had it many years ago, like many decades ago, when you can like when you have online prostitution and pornography and all of these kinds of things that are now available, if they were going to have the realization that technology has gone too far, they would have had it a while ago. So I don't think they're going to put on the brakes on anything. I think the limit is just like technological innovation, and what is really possible technologically. There are some philosophers who say that technology is limited, and that scientific progress has slowed down actually a great deal over the past 50 years. And they'll make an argument that the biggest innovations happened already 100 years ago, like with airplane, with the automobile, with the steam engine, with electricity, with nuclear power. These were the big innovations that they all happened pretty much within the like 70 years of each other. And now the technology that is developed is kind of like tweaking something that has already been there. Like the basic principle or the basic technology has been there. They're just like refining it. So this like has a kind of, it's kind of decreasing in terms of innovation. Another data point that these philosophers point out is that like the Nobel Prizes for physics and chemistry and biology 100 years ago were really big discoveries, like the nature of quantum mechanics, or general relativity or special relativity rather. So, because I don't think general relativity won a Nobel Prize, but those were big discoveries compared to now. Like now, the what's winning a Nobel Prize is like a very relatively small discovery compared to what it was decades ago. So I don't know if I agree with that, but it seems like to be the case that the level of innovation is not moving in a linear way or exponential way. Like things are not increasing like that. It seems to have plateaued a lot of the technological innovations. That's an idea. So is it possible to upload the brain to a cloud? They want to do that. They have the will to innovate, right? They just want to continue to change and update, but will they be able to do it? Or will there be like a collapse where this bubble is not going to sustain itself and all of the infrastructure is going to implode for some reason, and we're going to be back to where we were technologically, 500 years ago or 200 years ago. So who knows?
Yeah.
Like Allah knows what's going to happen, but these are the kinds of possibilities that different Muslims and non-Muslims are discussing.
I think it's very important to understand like the modernism or atheism, in the new atheism, whatever you want to call it. It's very important to understand this as almost a religion, because when I was reading a Quran, or when they were talking about the idol worshippers, right? And you think about the Christians, the Jews, the other religions, but we don't have a problem with that because there's no Christians around here, at least where I live. Like people identify as Christians, but if I ask them, do you believe in God? They say no. So what is this? I was baptized. That's my Christianity. But they drink, they do all these things. So this is not even an issue, and they've been destroyed. Christians, especially here, I mean, I don't know a Christian who upholds the Christian values, Catholic or Protestant. So I don't think the modern I wouldn't call it a battle, but I think the modern battle is between atheism or this modernism, and not between Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism. It's between atheism and people who believe in God. And then obviously Islam is one of the biggest religions, definitely. But I think this is the modern this will define the modern sort of clash of ideas, I think, coming forward, because the people are becoming more extreme, and I really don't know a lot of people who believe in God anymore. So yeah.
So
they all say, like, I think there's something out there. They all say that. I mean, that's their position, and that's God already, right? So to actually embrace a religion and practice it, I don't see that happening at all. I don't think this is gonna happen. At least for the masses, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of them will believe in God, like a concept of a God, but they say that they're spiritual. Like, I believe in God, but I'm spiritual. I see no appeal in following an organized religion. I see no appeal in following rules, and I just want to live my life, even though they're just living their life according to a set script that has been dictated to them from, you know, governments and policies and corporate culture and media. But they have this aversion to religious tradition. So I think you're right. I think that's the big conflict of ideas, and we have to be able to have discussions and debates. And I actually, you mentioned that debates are not necessarily the best avenue for Dawah. I agree, like it's not necessarily the best, but it has its place, because
it has, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, when you have a debate and that kind of back and forth, you're not necessarily going to convince the other side, but the people who are watching it, it will have an impact on them, and it can have the potential to benefit them. So
yeah, I agree, because I watched your debate with the apostate guy, and it definitely clarified a few things. So, but I was already on board with a few things, and I just watched it as an unbiased observer, and I saw like the aftermath. So it's definitely has its place, but just like one-on-one on the street, I think it's more about this spiritual thing. But debates definitely are great, and if you can debate, then you should. I don't feel I'm there yet that I can actually debate somebody, but maybe in the future it might happen. I just think that for people who say, well, why is it not enough to just say I'm spiritual? Like, why do I have to choose Islam or something? You know, what would you say to them? Like, my mom says this all the time, like, oh, I'm just a spiritual person, I don't have to do anything. Like, why is that not enough? How would you maybe gently clarify to those people that this is not enough?
Yeah, if you want to imagine you want to be, you know, an engineer, and you want to be successful in that as an engineer and be able to do things productively, you can't just say, oh, well, I just like math. Math is something cool, and then expect that you're going to become an engineer or be successful in that field, right? So if you want to be if you care about God, that's the essence of spirituality, a love of God, wanting to get closer to God. How can you do that? Like, how can you actually achieve that? It's not something that just like you don't get engineering or any kind of field or idea just by saying that you like it. No, you have to take steps to actually practice it and learn it, and it's a process, right? And again, this is like the materialistic mentality. Like when it comes to, oh, I want to learn a language, for example, like, oh, I want to improve my cooking, so I take cooking lessons and I go to classes, I watch videos, I practice cooking, and that's how I become a good chef, a good cook. And I enjoy that. I can't just say, oh, I'm just, I like cooking and not do anything to progress, right? So with Deen, it's the same thing. Like, and Muslims too. You have many Muslims, unfortunately, in the West who will say, yeah, I don't need, it's in my heart. Islam is in my heart. I don't need to practice it. But it doesn't really make sense. Like, what's in your heart? Your heart is something that can get rusty, can get rusted, and this is what it says in the Quran, that your heart can become blackened by dunya, and this is just a natural process unless you take efforts to polish it and to, you know, clean your heart. And then when you clean your heart, then it's more going to be able to love Allah. The capacity to love Allah and to feel iman requires a clean heart, but you have to take the effort and you have to know how to clean it. So like in Islam, for example, one of the most destructive things is something like hasad. Hasad means envy, right? And you wouldn't necessarily know that envy is something bad, or that it's like something that has specific definition and specific things that you have to avoid, and a specific nature. Those are things that Islam teaches in the Quran and Hadith. But if you didn't know that, then you can't avoid envy and hasad, and then your heart is going to become blackened because you're jealous and you're angry at others for things that they have that you don't have, that you want, you covet. So if you're a spiritual person, but you have all this envy, no, you're not a spiritual person. You have a black heart because you're constantly envious and jealous of others. So there are a lot of people will demote and belittle and think less of religious knowledge and the tradition and Islamic sciences because they think there's nothing to it. Oh, it's easy. I'm spiritual there. That means I'm going to be close to God. No, you have to, there's all this knowledge that there is, like you said, this infinite number of knowledge, and you have to know some basic things and practice some basic things in order to actually reach the target, which is being close to your creator.
Yeah. I think a lot of these people, they go to this new age stuff where they start doing the Wim Hof breathing and meditating and doing this and that and doing grateful exercises. But who are you grateful to? What are you talking about? Like, they try all these things and nothing fulfills them. And it's just the fear of submission. That's what holds them back. They don't want to submit. And I had the same fear. That's why I had this problem period for a couple of months, because I felt like, okay, if I think this is true, but if I embrace it, then I have to get rid of this, and I don't want to get rid of that. And it's just your desires. There's nothing, this is not a logical thing, but I think part of you lives in those desires. Like if I stop drinking, then, this is going to impact a lot of things in my life as well. And it's just, you have to kill part of your ego, which is not a pleasant process. But yeah, it's just the submission is very difficult, but you have to do it. And, and to just live with it's very important to live with the fear of Allah, to understand that there's no room in this world where two people are doing deal and he's not the third one. It's just simple as that. Like, to have that in your head, it's going to make every moral decision or every corner you wanted to cut much more easy, whether that's charity or whether that's not stealing and just basic stuff, it's very clear why you need to fear Allah.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair. Thank you for those insights on that. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So any other questions?
I guess for me, it's I think we pretty much ran through everything. Maybe I don't think this is important. I think you studied physics, right?
Yep.
Right. So when you watch quantum particles, when they are being observed, right? They behave differently. They start behaving like waves, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
You're talking about the two-slit experiment?
Yeah.
Yeah, so then they start acting like point-like particles instead of waves when you put it like a detector in one of the slits. Yeah. So yeah, there's like wave-like statistical behavior when for that source, for the energy source. But if you put a detector to observe like which slit is the particle going through or the wave going through, then it starts acting like a particle. So it's like called wave-particle duality. So it's a very interesting, fascinating experiment and idea in quantum mechanics that at the very small scale, matter behaves in unexpected ways that you can't even imagine sometimes.
Yeah, I remember learning this like 7 years ago, and I couldn't figure it out, like what happened here. And I think even Einstein, with the whole quantum mechanics, he was like baffled, and he couldn't figure it out. So it's just something to think about. And as an atheist, you don't really have an answer, but it's really like I don't know. I just mentioned it, but it just popped into my head.
Yeah. I loved reading about this topic. There's one really good book. It's more technical, but it's by David Albert. It's called Quantum Mechanics and Experience, and the whole book is about this experiment and the nature of reality according to a materialist perspective. But it's quite fascinating. We studied it in college, so in one of these philosophy of physics courses.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, I don't have any other questions. Do you have anything on me right now?
Well, I really enjoyed talking to you, and you have a very fascinating background. I think a lot of people are in your shoes in the past, where you were at, and we have really high hopes, for yourself and for Eastern Europe in general. And so, I think people, where can they follow you and see what you're doing?
Yeah, so if you call somebody from Eastern Europe Eastern European, they will be mad at you. So
Oh,
just a
sorry.
heads up. It's Central Europe, but I mean, it's all Eastern Europe. So they can follow me on Debating Truth. If you just type that into YouTube, you'll find my channel, and I try to talk to reverts, Muslims, some imams, and then I make some videos as well. So yeah, that's where you find me, Debating Truth with Jan, but you don't have to do that because you'll find me either way.
Okay. Okay, appreciate your time, Jan, and Allah protect you and protect all of us, and keep us on the straight path. I mean, and
Yeah,
for all
I
of you
mean,
watching, just follow us, follow Muslim Skeptic, follow Jan, and thank you for participating in the live chat. Hopefully it was a good live chat. We had some monitors this time, alhamdulillah. And we will catch you next time on Muslim Skeptic Live.